Hey, good morning, everybody. This morning we're starting our trip from North Island Naval Air Station in Coronado, California, just outside of San Diego. Made our way down to the most southern beach I could find, took a quick picture. Went down to Yacindra, California, the southernmost, southwestmost tip, the third corner of this trip, and made our way north on I-5. I-5 was super fun, especially in the morning in San Diego for the traffic, and found lane splitters. Now, lane splitting is where you can go in between the lanes, and it's legal in California. And the law says you're supposed to go 5 to 10 miles above the speed limit, but they don't. Anyway, we made our way up from San Diego to Solvang on the first part of our trip. Solvang's a neat little Danish town where I met with a friend of mine, Wade Koch. Wade Koch is the CEO of That Others May Live Foundation, the organization I'm trying to sponsor and get attention towards. We've talked about that. Anyway, the traffic was terrible in San Diego, kind of cleared north of LA or San Diego, but then back into it again when I got into LA. Altogether, there's one of those lane splitters. He was not going 5 to 10 miles an hour. Extremely dangerous. In a 1 mile span, I saw two motorcycle lane splitters on the side of the road that had been hit by people changing lanes. And there were just dozens and dozens of motorcycles. Not very smart, if you ask me. I'm sorry. I know you guys do that in California, but the way they were riding at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour above the speed limit was pretty scary. Anyway, made my way up through LA, got north of LA, it's beautiful, got up into some foggy hills and made our way down into Solvang. If you ever get a chance to go there, what a cool city. Had lunch with Wade down there in Solvang, and then I met a young lady that at Olive Hill Farms that was a family friends that owned that place. That's Olive Place, olive oil place. Anyway, then made my way north from Solvang and took off. We're going to talk about a rescue I did off of Iceland along this trip, and made it all the way up to Salinas, California, and stayed the night. Really beautiful drive, nice and easy, low traffic on US 101, and had an In-N-Out burger for dinner and got ready for the next day. So let's go ahead and continue on with that rescue discussion.
All right, guys. I guess I'll talk about what it was like to be an Air Force rescue pilot. This time I'll talk about a rescue I did up in Iceland that turned into not so good. This was back in it was 2000. Yeah, September of 2000. I got asked to go fly a rescue. It was about 400 miles off the southwest coast of Iceland. 400 miles off the south coast of Iceland and southwest. It was a Japanese fishing boat, and one of the crew members had actually his leg severed by a cable. The Icelandic Coast Guard couldn't go out because it was too far. They don't have in-flight refueling. We had in-flight refueling. I'll show you a video of that to get the patient out. To be able to get to the patient. And so I had just seen the movie The Perfect Storm, if you'd seen that or read the book. And the book was quite a bit different. The actual story was actually different than what actually is in the movie. But the movie really brought home that I never want to be in a position where I end up having to ditch my helicopter because I couldn't get on the hose to refuel. And I would not put my crew in that position. So 2 weeks after I saw the movie, I got asked to go fly this mission. And in the conditions were absolutely the worst. We were reported 70 knot winds, 50-foot seas, unknown ceiling, zero illumination. We fly with night vision goggles, so we couldn't see anything. We accept the mission. When you're a 30-something pilot trying to make it happen, you don't turn down flights. At least I didn't. So we ended up launching. When you go on a long flight like that, you want to refuel first, and so the C-130, that's what we refueled behind, HC-130. They got into a position to give us gas, but we were at 500 feet above the water because the ceilings were about 600 feet or even less, and we're about an hour out to sea. And let me tell you something, when you're going out to sea and looking to land behind you and you've never done anything like this in your life, it was a bit daunting. But anyway, we asked this HC-130 if he could come down to our altitude, and he said, no. Can you come up to my altitude? It was like 8,000 feet. So we popped into the clouds and went up to 8,000 feet, and it was still cloudy. You couldn't see anything, so we couldn't AR. We went back down to 500 feet, which is difficult. It's called instrument meteorological conditions, IMC letdown. You're not going to hit anything, but it's still challenging. So I went back down to 300 feet and said it was at this point we were making a go-no-go decision if I was going to be able to get fuel or not. The tinker called me back, the C-130, and said, yeah, we got clear skies at 10,000 feet. So I popped up to 10,000 feet back in the clouds, and we got our gas. Yeah. So one funny thing was on this particular flight, when we were getting ready, somebody brought us out hamburgers and Cokes, and I drank a large Pepsi. And now I'm going on this long flight, and boy, guess what? I had to go to the bathroom. When you're in the helicopter, you have over the water, you wear this what is called a Mustang survival suit. It's very thick. My helicopter, I can't get up or walk into the back of the bathroom. You can't get out of the cockpit. So I had a little piddle bag, and I remember we got our gas, finally got the gas, and the sun was setting to my right, and I'm getting in position to go to the bathroom, and my co-pilot sitting next to me is to my left. The sun is setting to my right, and I have to go bad, but so I'm sort of standing up in my seat and trying to stay off the controls and getting ready to go to the bathroom, and my co-pilot says, "Hey, Olaf, tell me that's your pinky," because I was silhouetted next to him, when he was looking at me. And I said, "Of course it's my pinky." And it gave me stage fright, so I couldn't go to the bathroom anymore. This whole flight was about 8 hours, 8.5 hours, so I had to hold it the whole way. So once we got the gas and I couldn't go to the bathroom, the C-130 pressed on to the survivor's location, and it got dark really quick. And we got to the location a couple hours later, and I had to do another IMC letdown. So we descended out of about 6,000 feet through the clouds, and it was at night now, and broke out of the clouds, couldn't see anything, just black. We used our radar altimeter to determine our altitude, and I could see a light off in the horizon, which was the ship that we were going to go make the pickup on. The winds were howling, the seas you couldn't see, but they were showing about 50-foot seas, and we made our way to the boat. Now, the way that we did it was the C-130 had a Japanese linguist, and he would communicate what I wanted them to do. And one of the things I wanted them to do is to turn the ship not directly into the wind, but off to its left side. You can look at my hand. And what that does is it puts them off the wind line. It puts me directly into the wind to make it easier for me to hoist. The Japanese captain said no, very assertively, that he wasn't going to put his boat off the wind line and the sea state. So I had to hover with a crosswind, a 50 or 60, 70 knot crosswind, and try to hover over the bow of the ship like I was taught, or the stern. And I put it over the bow, and it's so important when you're flying a helicopter to have a hover reference to see what you're hovering over. You can't, it's almost impossible. I couldn't do it anyway, just by your flight engineer in the back who's running the hoist, come left to, go right to. What is 2 feet? You don't know. What is 5 feet? What is 10 feet? The boat's moving at 15 knots. And so anyway, I brought it to a hover over the bow, and there was just all sorts of wires and everything hanging over. There was no place to put a PJ down. And I tried to hold that position, and I couldn't hold it. I got low enough to hold it, and I heard, "Climb, climb, climb," in the back, and I brought it up to a higher hover where I couldn't see the ship anymore. I tried to hold my position. I couldn't do it. I circled around, tried again, this time at a different angle, and I got into a condition what is called loss of tail rotor authority. So I'm holding the hover, and I've got full left pedal to keep the aircraft straight, but it wasn't holding it. The aircraft started spinning to the right. So I had to fly forward and get out of that before I flew out of control. So I tried for an hour, hour and a half, trying to find a position to get this guy off. First get a PJ on board, a pararescueman on board, and then get him off. And I just simply couldn't do it. I was told not to hover at the middle of the ship, tried the bow, I tried the stern. I couldn't do it. And at some point, I was, just totally exhausted, covered in sweat, out of ideas. Had to tell the crew, this isn't our day. We had learned the patient was stable. I was not, one of the techniques you could do is allow the PJs to jump in the water and swim to the boat, but not in this sea state, no. I said, PJ didn't even want to do it. So that wasn't an option. So I said, it's time to go home. And when we came on the way back home, I punched back in the clouds, got above the clouds, and now I've got to get gas. And because we're a lot faster going back because the wind's at our tail. But in the movie, The Perfect Storm, the helicopter that's in this movie, if you ever watched it, they attempt to get refueling out at sea, and they're unable because the refueling was too difficult. In-flight refueling was too difficult. They ended up ditching the helicopter. One of the crew members was lost at sea. Everybody else survived. But after watching that movie, I said, damn it, I never want to be in that position. Well, here I am. We have moderate to heavy to severe turbulence, and I'm getting ready to try to refuel in air on the way back to Iceland and go through the checklist to get the probe out. The fuel probe on us extends out, and what you do is when you extend it out, it goes out beyond the rotor disc, so it's easier to safely to plug the C-130 drogue for fuel. Well, as we ran the checklist, we found that the fuel probe would not extend. So there's a problem. I'm in severe turbulence at night, and my probe won't extend. So guess what I had to do? I ran the ditching checklist, because if I don't get on the hose, we're going to run out of gas pretty quick, and then we're going to be in big trouble. So get that checklist done. So I did the ditching checklist, and then lo and behold, while we ran that checklist, the probe came out. But I've still got to get it on the hose. And that is one of the most difficult things to do, is in-flight refueling on a good day. Now I'm on one of the worst days possible. But guess what? Somehow, some way, I was able to get on the hose. I'd gotten some pretty good practice, and I think it was my very first attempt. I got on the hose, and we got our gas, enough gas to get on home with it. We were cruising at 200 knots going back with the tailwind. So we get on the hose, and then I have to file an instrument flight plan to get back in and do an instrument approach back at Keflavik, and the winds are severe. The storm is over the top of Keflavik, Iceland, and I have to be on my very best to make my instrument approach and get my instrument approach. And now the winds are so severe as we get to the ground, and I get back to the hangar. I park it as close as I can to this huge hangar to keep it off the winds. See, when the blades slow down, when you shut a helicopter down, they flex, and they flex so much when you're in severe winds that it could actually strike the helicopter. So I evacuated the crew, and I put my seat to the lowest setting, and I shut the aircraft down, and fortunately the aircraft was fine, and I didn't get struck by the blades. But I got to tell you, that was one of the most dejected, most hard moments of my professional career. I was new to the Air Force, relatively new, and I was trying to, prove myself, and here it was, I wasn't able to get the guy. My wing commander, our group commander, and my squadron commander came out and both thanked me profusely for making it back safely, saying I did a good job, but I was in tears. I was so dejected that I had failed to rescue this guy. I thought I was the first one that had ever failed. And next day it was even made worse. As I was walking back into my squadron, I was in the hallway, and I heard two back-enders, a flight engineer and a gunner. Those are non-pilots, crew members, and they were commenting talking to each other, and they were saying they didn't know I was there. They said if it had been anybody other than home, that flight would have been successful, meaning I was a crappy pilot. So that made me feel terrible. I was called to my squadron commander's office, and Colonel Leibach, one of the best men I've ever worked for. And I again apologized for failing to accomplish the mission. And he goes, Olaf, I'm so happy and so proud of you for making that tough call to come home. You brought the crew home. That's what's most important. But he says, I'd like you to do something for me. I want you to put a briefing together for the Icelandic Coast Guard in Reykjavik They want to stand up a night vision goggle program, and I would like you to give them a class on night vision goggles and how to employ them. And I really think he was trying to uh, get me back up on the horse to make me feel good. He saw how upset I was for not making it, and he gave me this task and said, "You're one of my best goggle pilots. I want you out there, NVG pilots." And so that made me feel good. And so I put this presentation together. A couple days later, I went to the Icelandic Coast Guard and gave them a briefing. And they sure liked me with my name. They called me Olaf. When I said, "Hi, I'm Olaf." "Oh, no, you're Olaf." I guess how they pronounce it in Icelandic. And so anyway, I gave them my briefing on how to do NVGs, to set up a program and what we do. And they really thanked me and appreciated the briefing. But they said, "Olaf, would you like to see a video of us rescuing the man you could not get?" That made me feel really good. When that Japanese fishing trawler, we couldn't pick him up, he made his way towards Iceland. And when he was within range of the Icelandic Coast Guard, they launched and rescued the Japanese fisherman. And so they showed me the video. And first I said, "Yeah, well, look, it's daytime and it's not windy, as windy as I went, and the sea state is not even a quarter of what it was. But yeah, okay, let's see you do it." But the thing they did was they showed me their technique. It was like one of those moments that you have, like this total epiphany, like, why didn't I know this? It's such a simple concept. But what they did was, instead of hovering over the bow or the stern where you could get hit by the boat and you can't see the boat and all those things, there we got another GS right here. He's got his camera on here. Look at that. Woo-hoo! Anyway, so what we try to do is hover over the bow or the stern, and we try to stay over the top of the ship, and you need a hover reference. And if you have a problem with a cable and the cable breaks, the pararescueman's going to fall, hit the deck. If you have a problem with the aircraft, it's going to crash on top of the ship. Well, because you're over the top. Well, with the Icelandic Coast Guard, they do something completely different. They hover off to the side of the ship, okay, instead of hovering over it. And now they have a hover reference the entire time. And they do use this tagline. We use a tagline, but it was for a different purpose, to keep the basket from spinning. They use this tagline to do a lateral hoist, pretty much. So they went to the middle of the ship, again, where I was told, never go to the middle of the ship. Well, that's where it actually doesn't bounce the most, in the middle, if that makes sense. You know, at the bow and the stern, that's where it bounces the most. There goes that GS. Anyway, so I was amazed at how they did this. They used a tagline. It was a maritime rope instead of our yellow monofilament line. The tagline was a marine rope that had lead in it, so it didn't blow around in the wind with a big weight. They came to the side of the ship. They dropped the tagline below the helicopter, and there was a man at the middle of the ship, a crew member, and they dragged that rope directly to him. So they just slid to the right for just enough to where the guy on the ship would get the rope, and then as soon as he got the rope, they'd go back to the side. Okay, so now they've got a reference, a hover reference, if you can think of that, looking down at the ship, know where the ship is. If you have an engine failure, if something goes wrong, you're going to go into the water instead of crashing on the ship. So I just can't tell you how much more easy it is to hover next to a thing than over the top of a thing. Okay? Okay, so now I was wondering how they're going to do the rest of it. Well, the swimmer, the rescue swimmer, we call them PJs, went down the hoist, and then as they got about 2/3 of the way down, the helicopter slid to the right. Meanwhile, the guy with the tagline on the boat pulls them towards it. So they have like a guidance to get them to the exact spot. So they go 3, 2, 1. They get over the top of the ship just enough to where the rescue swimmer can be lowered down to the deck. And as soon as he's on the deck, the helicopter slides back to the left, away from danger and giving back a hover reference. I couldn't believe it. That was like cheating. It was so much easier. And I saw that, and I was like amazed. Well, I want to know how they do the extraction, and they basically just did it in reverse. The tagline was brought back down. I mean, they retained the contact with the ship with the tagline and stayed in that position while the PJ or the rescue swimmer prepped the patient for like 10 minutes. Once the patient was ready for being lifted, They maintained that position off to the left. They lowered the cable back down through the tag line. It didn't stay there. Got the cable connected to the rescue swimmer in the basket. And when they were given ready, they slid to the right over the top of the ship just for enough to get them clear of the deck. They'd lift them up, and then they would slide back to the left. And then they would bring the remaining of the hoist up. It was amazing to me. And I know it sounds silly, but I'd never seen that technique, and that technique I knew would work much better than the way I was taught. And so I asked them, I said, where did you learn this technique? They said, oh, yes, the Air Force taught us that. U.S. Air Force taught us that. I was like, you're kidding me. We had lost that technique. It was no longer in our books. So I saw this technique. I said, we got to learn it. They actually, when we got done, they gave me one of their taglines, a maritime tagline, rope. And I took it back to my squadron commander, Colonel Wade Koch, and I said, sir, we have got to learn this particular technique. And he goes, all right, you do it. So I went back to the Coast Guard, and I actually flew with them. I got another rope, and they taught me their techniques, and I put it together in a training format for the U.S. Air Force, and actually started training it over land with our helicopters. And we trained, and then eventually, before that happened, we actually had a symposium with the Icelandic Coast Guard. The Icelandic Coast Guard brought out a Coast Guard cutter, a big cutter, out to our Keflavik, the base, to our port. My whole squadron got on, some of the group leadership as well, and we went out to sea. And then the flight engineers got on their helicopter, and they went out to sea, and they did an aerial demonstration around the Coast Guard cutter of how they do their multiple sea rescues. It was just amazing. I couldn't believe, after all these years, we come into the, on an assignment to Keflavik, Iceland. You come from a land base, and you have to learn in a year or two how to be an expert open water rescue guy. And we never worked with Icelandic Coast Guard. That was my genesis of putting the symposium together. So we went out to sea, saw all the different iterations, came back to port, and then we went back to a big hangar, and we had a real symposium with pilots, dispatchers with dispatchers, flight engineers and PJs together, and we had small groups, and we discussed how we do operations and how we could do it better, exchanged ideas. And then we got together, had a big party, and it was a huge success. When that was done, I went out and actually did rescues using this technique. And I'd like to share with you a video of them and how it's done. I'll show how we put the pararescue in on board. In this particular case, it was a PJ. One PJ came down with a basket, will be the first iteration. The second iteration will be putting a PJ and a rescue doctor on board. The next video will be rescuing or getting in-flight refueling while they're prepping the patient for extraction. And then the last one is where we actually extract the patient out with a PJ. And I'll show you all three of those videos. I'll put them in here. But anyway, I did multiple rescues using that technique in my tour over there in Iceland, and it became a big success. And when I moved back to the States, I was an instructor pilot at Kirtland Air Force Base, Albuquerque, New Mexico. I got the call one day that I was going to Las Vegas, Nevada. It was for our tactics manual rewrite. It was our 3-3 rewrite. That's the title of it. Anyway, and I was going to be in charge of guess what? Rescue water operations for the Air Force, H-86 Pavehawk, my aircraft. And I couldn't believe it. So if you think back to when that morning after, when I heard those guys talking, saying if there'd been anybody but Olaf, this would have been a successful flight. That just put a fire in my hide to get better at this, to figure it out. And I was given that technique, was handed to me because I taught that NVG class to the Icelandic Coast Guard. And now, these years later, I go from being the worst guy to being the guy that literally rewrote the chapter 12, 3-3, our Air Force Rescue Manual, on how to do water ops. And I thought there'd be some sort of panel of guys. Nope, it was just me. And I, I literally rewrote the book on how to do water ops for the Air Force. And to this day, I don't know if it's still in there. It's been quite a few years, but I've watched videos of rescues, and they still use this technique. So you ever talk about, when I tell my kids, or I tell people about, the importance of living through failure and making yourself better, I think this is a perfect example, because believe me, I was at my lowest point that day when I failed, and then I used that motivation and fire in me to make myself better, and in the process, I believe I made the Air Force better. So anyway, I just wanted to share that particular story. I hope you enjoy it, and enjoy the scenery here. Our U.S. Highway 101 heading up to Salinas. All right, bye-bye.